Hello, folks. I am Rodney A. Brooks, and welcome to RodneyABrooks.com. We're today welcoming a special guest, Jennifer Belmont Jennings, um, Trust and Estate Attorney at MGD Law in St. Louis, Missouri. Now, and I say special guest because Jennifer is both an attorney and a certified financial planner. And she was selected on the 40 under 40 list, the St. Louis Business Journal. Hello, Jennifer. Okay, now, and so you mentioned irrevocable trusts. Okay, let's talk about the different types of trusts.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, you could have a whole series on this too. I'm going to try to keep it simple because I don't know that people want me to start talking about like intentionally defective grantor trusts and weird stuff like that. There are When we use the word revocable, it's like you can revoke it, you can change it, you can do whatever you want with it. You're the owner. When you die, the trust becomes irrevocable, and so that generally just means it's at one time unchangeable, basically. But the way it is, it is. Now there's a lot of statutes popping up in different states that are allowing some flexibility with modifying trusts that are already in that irrevocable status. That is a conversation for another day. That's like estate planning 404. But people use these vehicles for different things, and a lot of times it has to do with estate tax reasons. So, right, most people do not have an estate tax problem. Like right now, you get over $13 million to give away during your life, each person on your death, without having to pay estate taxes. So most people don't have that much. And at one time, that number was a lower number, right? I mean, it was like $1 million. It was even lower at one. I think it was like in 300,000 or something at one point back in the olden days. But that number is really high right now. It's set to go back down to like this, probably the 6 to 7-ish million. It's going to be adjusted for inflation back in 2020 or in 2026. But everybody gets a certain amount that they can pass without taxes. If you have an estate tax problem, these irrevocable trusts, it's about getting money out of your estate, about you no longer having control over that money, right? Me, who has given that money, I don't have control, so it's not mine, into certain vehicles that are designed to help. It could be to like pay estate taxes, like people have life insurance trusts. Like if you have a lot of life insurance and you want that to be out of your estate, you don't want that included in that $13 million that you're allowed to give, you can create a trust that would own your policies, and the policies would pay to that, and the policy funds would be distributed according to your wishes when you set it up, but it's really no longer yours to control. And there are other trusts that do things like that. It's really just about shifting money that you have now, using up some of that $13 million that you have, shifting it to another vehicle and allowing it to grow there so that it's not includable in your own estate when you die. And because the state taxes are high, it's like 40%. I mean, you might as well just make it 50%. I mean, it's like half the money above those exemption amounts is going straight to Uncle Sam. So understandably, people want to avoid it if they can. They've already paid taxes on the money, right? When you earned it, you paid taxes. This is just like an extra tax because you were successful, or sometimes you were lucky and you had parents who were successful, and you get to inherit that. So I think those vehicles are not for everybody, but they do make sense in some circumstances and are worth exploring, especially if you have a sizable estate. But most people do not need to go down that path.
Okay, so now, okay, let's talk about executors. Okay, how do you select an executor, and are there times when someone might ask you to be an executor and you say no? I mean, what, let's talk about an executor, what they do, and the pros and cons.
Yeah. Well, ideally, you're not having to use your executor much because you did a revocable trust and you have a trustee and they're handling all this stuff. But you do not have to say yes. It's, I think, a good do and don't do list several people. And I think it's also good to list a backup. Even a corporate entity can serve in that role. You want to make sure you talk to that entity. There's different ones, they have minimums, like they don't want to come if you've got $100,000. A huge bank is not going to want to be the executor on your estate. But there are private trust companies and places that can step in, and you can name somebody that you trust, right? It is a job. It's work. It's not easy. I mean, there are things like you might be working on selling the house, getting it ready, having to deal with the clutter, having to distribute assets to people. You're hiring the lawyer to file the paperwork. If you're doing stuff with court, you're responsible for getting the tax return prepared for the year of death. It's a responsibility. And that's why, like, a lot of times in families, there could be one sibling, right? You might have a sibling who, like, I do this for a living, right? So I'm probably a natural choice for my parents to name to handle that stuff, because it's not that big of a deal. Where on my brother, it might be a lot harder. That's not his day job. And so it's not choosing like who's your favorite. That's not how it works. It's who makes sense to take this on. And sometimes people name co-representatives. There are some families that, they don't want to hurt feelings of the kids, and they'll say, we're making them co-executors or personal representatives, and they can work together. And that can be fine. Sometimes that can be not fine. If they don't agree on stuff, that can be a problem. But you want to have somebody that you can trust, who's up to the task. They can always say no. A lot of documents allow people to delegate. Like a trust document has, you'll have delegation powers where you can delegate people to do certain tasks. And maybe I'm a successor trustee and I'm handling like a lot of the stuff, but I don't want to deal with a certain aspect of it, because I can appoint somebody. I could appoint a corporate trust company to handle like certain things. Like, so a lot of documents will give you some flexibility to outsource, and a will to hire the professionals that you need to hire to handle these matters. So they're not expecting you as the executor to actually prepare the tax return. They are going to hire, a CPA firm or an accounting firm to prepare that tax return, and that's fine. But they have a fiduciary obligation to administer your estate and make sure that everything's going, according to the way that you want it to, and that the laws are being followed.
Okay, so let's talk for a minute about, because you mentioned families and picking a family member. Now, families sometimes fight about executors, and so let's talk about some of those issues. And I mean, if you have some examples, that without naming names, of course.
Well, yeah,
um,
I would lose my law license if I started doing that,
right.
and my job too.
Yes.
So
Um, so yeah, so I mean, part of that is um, some family members are unhappy with who is selected as executors. Um, some family members are unhappy with the decisions that the other family member makes. I don't know if there's a way to avoid all of that, but talk about some of the issues that come up with families, and how
sure.
sometimes they can be resolved or not.
Well, we like to use anti-terrorism clauses in our trusts. Like if you are disputing something that's not, if you have a trustee who literally breached a fiduciary duty and they like stole all the money, you are not going to be penalized for saying, hey, wait a second, something's wrong here. But if you are like complaining about you didn't get enough or that kind of thing, we like to put a stop to that. I think family disputes definitely come up. And if you want to raise attorney's fees, that is the fastest way to do that, is to start arguing and asking questions. That can get very heated and send you into litigation. And nobody really wins when that's the case, unless there's still money left over and somebody was really doing something bad. I think we try to I think transparency is really important when you're acting as the executor or you're acting as the trustee. There are certain requirements for you to be transparent, but I think just making a very conscious effort to still include the family members that you are working with in the process, and letting them know what's happening and letting them know, this is what's going on. I think that is helpful. If you're too secretive, that can create problems and people are going to ask questions. I think parents having conversations, a lot of this starts with the parents too, right? I mean, sometimes children forget that this is their parents' money, right? This is not your money. It's not my money. My parents can do whatever they want with their money. Do I have a preference for how they should distribute it when they pass away? Yes, I do. But I do not get a say in that. And so I think trying to instill just kind of like an appreciation for the fact that like this is your parents' money, this is like a gift, like we're not entitled to this. I think that's helpful, but that starts with the parents. And I think if you're in a situation where you have a lot of wealth, it's helpful to try. I know it's not always, it's easier said than done, right? I don't have $500 million where I can be like, this is what I did in this case, and it worked perfectly. But, setting the expectation that you expect your kids to work and you expect them to do things and contribute to society. I mean, that's the nice thing about a trust is you can tie up giving them money based on those things. You can do things like my child I'll match their salary, right? So they're incentivized to go work, and they know if they get a job that pays $75,000 a year, the trust can match that every year. So I think those are just kind of instilling family values and the kind of culture in your family that you want, like that parents have got to do that all along the way. You sometimes you can do all the right things. And I've seen the most wonderful parents ever who did everything right have a child who's not that grateful, right? Because humans are humans. We can all be selfish. And so I think in your documents, you can try to minimize that. Sometimes having an independent person be in charge could be the best decision. Keep it out of the siblings and the kids' hands altogether. Go straight for the corporate trustee, the corporate executor, the people that are going to be transparent, following the documents. That's why it's so important to, make sure you have documents that are clear, that people understand what they're supposed to do.